In the past, I've conceived of the human brain like a computer. It's got different, modules that are approximately equivalent to CPU, GPU, RAM, and so on. But in reality, it's almost like it functions more like a Turing machine with the vacuum tubes and punch cards connected through 5 adapters to a ZX Spectrum, connected through another 5 adapters to the Deep Blue chess computer or something. It's not so much that it's just different modules that do different things. It's like, because they evolved at totally different times and adapted under totally different conditions over possibly millions of years, it's like they run on completely different hardware and completely different software, and they're all trying to communicate with each other. The higher level parts of your brain are using neurons and one set of neurotransmitters, and then your limbic system is using another set of neurotransmitters, and then your pituitary gland and your hypothalamus are using another set, and they're influenced by hormones sent up from your adrenal glands and your sex organs and so on. It's a mess. It's like a tree that's roots are going down into the top of another tree, that's roots are going down into the top of another tree, and the top tree has no idea what the bottom tree is doing and communicating to it, but they're somehow linked in some way. In the Iliad by Homer, he has one of his characters talking out loud to the lower level of himself inside himself, scolding it for wanting to look at the aftermath of a battle. The ancient Greeks considered the different parts of ourselves as like this rational, logical level, an emotional level, and a base animal urge level. So even the ancient Greeks thought that inside of us there are at least 2 wolves. And I suppose it's not a bad observation. I think maybe most of the time people these days thinking of it more in 2 levels, like conscious and unconscious. But yeah, back then at least it was less that there were just 3 different sections of the brain. It was more like there were different people inside you, another version of yourself. And sometimes these people had different goals to each other, in opposition to each other, and that it was the job of the rational, logical part of our brain to keep the other parts of us under control. But this took discipline and practice. There's a number of logical fallacies that we can fall into because they kind of satisfy these lower animal versions of ourselves, and either our logical brains don't realize that they're wrong, or they're just not strong enough to overcome those animal urges we have. Because our instincts are stronger than our reason, we suffer these fallacies. And some of these fallacies can affect our gaming, our tabletop role-playing, and I think, at least in my opinion, king among them is the sunk cost fallacy. Hi, my name's Matt. Welcome to the Tomb of Lime. So, thank you for all the comments on my previous videos. Looking at them, it appears to me that maybe some people are taking the critiques I'm making a little personally. But I just let you know that the only reason I'm filming these videos is so that I can send them back in time to my past self. Because, and he's the only person that I'm critiquing. He's the only person I'm addressing here because he is the worst for all of these things. And I think it'll be easier for him to hear it coming from me. Oh, and young Matt, I don't know what year this will reach you, but you probably need to hear this. Even though it'll be tempting to crack open a glow stick and use the juices as face paint, because it'll look really cool for about 5 minutes, but if it gets in your eyes, it will sting for hours. So, the sunk cost fallacy is the idea that we're more likely to want to continue to invest in something just because we've invested in it already. That even if it's not the most optimal thing for us, that we'll continue to want to do it. So whenever anyone tells you that some psychological part or module in our brain is designed to do some certain thing or is adapted for some certain thing in particular, I would always be a little bit skeptical, because most of these things are our best theories, but they are highly theoretical. So I think working with what the experts think is the best theory is still worthwhile, but just don't hitch your wagon too closely. But with that, I mean, why do we have this issue with sunk cost? It seems to me that actually committing to something and following through with it, even though you don't get immediate returns, is actually extremely powerful. And I suppose in our discussion of sunk cost, we do not want to swing the pendulum too far and say that being flippant and switching between things too often and giving up on things too early is actually a good idea, because it's not. But there are plenty of instances in our tabletop role-playing, especially as a GM, I think, as a player as well, that we can fall into this trap and that it would be beneficial for us to be aware of. 4th edition Dungeons & Dragons had 30 levels of play. Naively, I thought that this was designed to be the best way, the best experience you could have to play the game. That the way it meted out, player powers and mechanics and loot and magic items and whatever, they were handed out in a way that helped you learn the game and at a pace that made it the most enjoyable experience. That if you did it the way they had designed it, it would be balanced and fun. Level 1 through to 30. I mean, I found that as you got closer to epic tier play, the magic item and economy thing just totally broke down. At the point that we were playing, it was like if you ever swatted a fly, that 50 bags of gold would have to fall out of it to keep up with the economy they had in that game. In at least an excerpt of an interview I saw with some of the 4E devs, they said that the second player's handbook that they released had a bunch of feats in it to balance things back out again, because the original player's handbook ships with a leveling system that was outdated for their own game. I started to have my doubts that maybe the game devs knew the best way to handle this kind of system. Now, I don't want to throw every game dev under the bus here, but guess what? Guess what we should be using to structure progression in a role-playing game. So role-playing is about characters and their goals and motivations. And I think you should be structuring your play around the characters. I don't think you should be committing to this level campaign. What you should look at is what the characters want, what their motivations are, and their goals, and then you should structure it around whether they can, when and if they achieve those goals. So do not get suckered into the cheap dopamine of a structured leveling system, okay? They're not really meaningful. If anything, they're like sunk cost generators. It's hard enough to deal with sunk costs that there aren't parts of the game that are specifically designed to suck you in like this. Now, I don't mind change. I don't mind characters progressing over time, right? Even mechanically, okay? But those level numbers are pretty arbitrary. What we don't want to do is we don't want to drag a character back for more just because there's more collectibles on a list that they've given you in the player's handbook to collect. Let them go. When their story is finished, when their arc is finished, whatever it is, whatever milestone that they should reach as a character is done, let them go. Now, as a GM, you might find yourself anticipating what the players might want to do, and being prepared seems like a good idea, right? At some point, you may introduce bias if you anticipate what they're going to do, because you may become more fond of one of the things that you come up with. This might even be an unconscious bias. You might just put more effort into creating some certain charismatic character that you imagine that they might meet, or lavishly decorating a battle map for a combat that you suddenly becomes inevitable. You might craft a character arc, a story climax. For it to happen, you suddenly need that character to be alive when they get there. Now, even if you took everything to heart that I said in my last video, if you've got the fiat to set difficulty levels, DCs behind the screen, as it were, and worse, you get to let the player know after they've rolled whether they've succeeded or not. Like, what hope do you have in not tipping the scales if you're already invested in a certain outcome? You generally invest in something because you want to see a return on it. So if you're investing in these things, you're going to have a bias to see that kind of return come out of it. But it may not be the case that you need to not invest at all, but just make sure you're investing in the right things. What you want to invest in is what your world is like, what your NPCs are like. You don't want to invest in what will happen, certainly not what will happen, but not even what could happen. Not what the NPCs will do, but not even what the NPCs could do, but what they are like. If you invest in what the world is like, what the characters are like, you, along with the players, will find out what will happen. And I think you'll spend less energy to get there because you won't waste energy on futures that never eventuate. Now, there's a bit of a shortcut I feel, is a shortcut to learning how to deal with some of the sunk costs that we get in RPGs. A shortcut to changing your mindset. Now, if we do conceive of our, unconscious urges as another us inside us, like the ancient philosophers or some ancient philosophers did, it's not the case that it's like another equal, okay? Because our rational mind and is going up against like these ancient primal urges, that have been around millions of years longer. What hope does our nascent frontal cortex have going up against the ancient power of the hypothalamus or the limbic system? If there's anything that my journey with weight loss and fitness has taught me, it's that if you are going up against yourself, if your opponent is yourself and an ancient primal version of yourself, then the only way to win is to cheat. My willpower in the rational part of my brain, looking at my long-term goals, has no chance up against hunger and the primal part of my brain trying to solve a short-term goal. So you can't rely on it. You can't rely on willpower. Before me lies the pantry. And my rational brain holds out as long as it can against the primal ravenous animal, but not forever. And then this animal flings open the door to feast on what it finds within. But what's in there when it opens the door? Nothing. Because my rational brain, in its moments of lucidity and power, had the foresight to not buy the things that I knew my primal urges would drive me towards while I was at the supermarket. So I left that garbage on the shelf, and now my primal animal urges are forced to eat a carrot. Forced to do this enough times through a dark night of the soul, this primal animal part of myself actually starts to enjoy not feeling bloated and not having oily skin and the rest of it. Enough about that. The best thing I think that really helped me avoid sunk costs in my role-playing games is to, just like not having that food in the pantry, try out systems where those sunk costs are just not a concern. If you want to break out of this cycle, then playing in a one-shot, totally unlike the systems that you would normally play with, might give you a taste of what the right investments are if you just cannot invest the wrong way in those games. Just by the nature of being a one-shot, actually, means that character investment is low, then if they die, what does it matter? There's no leveling to be done. There's no XP to gather. And if you're just doing a one-shot, then you'll necessarily have to be less invested in the technicality of all the combat rules, especially if you just deliberately pick a system that has lighter rules in that area. Might even be worth, when you choose your game, to actually choose a different set of people than you normally play with, because if those people have all these sunk costs into their current characters and that current campaign or whatever, then it might make them resistant to learning to avoid these pitfalls. If you choose a game where you cannot invest in the traps, in the holes, in the pits of sunk cost, then it might teach you ways that you can bring this kind of prep and this kind of running this kind of game to your regular game, even if that one has these traps built into it. For me, this was Tales from the Loop. Free League, for a period of time, had the core rules up there for free. And it's got, no combat. The characters cannot die. Creating a character only takes a matter of minutes. It allows you to focus on a totally different side of the game than I was used to focusing on. Of course, it doesn't have to be this. It doesn't have to be something this light. But the mystery that I ran for that session, that one shot, I've actually put that in the description below. I was never going to release this because, I wrote it originally because I thought, I can publish this. They've got this little system where you can publish your own works based on their IPs. But it sent me down a path that changed my whole outlook on RPGs. And the way I wrote it it commits a lot of the sins that I have actually warned people against in my previous videos. So if you do check that out, if you even decide to run it, do not run it as written, okay? But it'll be interesting to look at because you'll be able to see how much my opinion has changed and how, even though I was doing it in a way that I wouldn't do it today, that moment still sent me down the path that led to where I am today. So it's there for posterity. You can see what I was like when I was a storyteller. So being aware of the fallacies is a great start, okay? But I also think that trying systems where they just are not a concern is a great way to see what it's like to be free of them, to see what it's like to run a game in a totally different mindset. So I'm interested. Have you ever tried a system that totally changed the way you play, sent you on a different path? If so, let me know what it was. Because one, there could be new GMs here that it would be beneficial to get in early on this kind of variety. But then again, there could be plenty of experienced GMs who have had their nose to the grindstone for too long and could do with a breath of fresh air. So let me know what changed things for you and what led you down the path that you took until today. So yeah, I hope that keeping an open mind and exploring other systems, even if you end up going back to the old system, it might still give you insights that you wouldn't have been able to get otherwise. So use this as an excuse to try something new. You might be surprised of how much of a difference it makes. But anyway, that's what I got for today. My name's Matt. This was The Tomb of Lime. Thanks for listening.